Something just shifted in the atmosphere over North America. And I need you to understand this before you make a single plan for the days ahead. Because the story most people are telling right now is wrong. You have probably heard that relief is coming, that the heat is finally breaking, that a cool front is going to sweep in and rescue you from this brutal summer. And that is partly true. But the newest data tells a much harder story than that. Because the cool air that so many of you have been praying for is not going to reach nearly as far as everyone hoped. And behind it, the heat is loading up to come roaring back with a fury we have not seen yet this entire season. On top of that, the Pacific is spinning up another dangerous system aimed toward Hawaii, an island chain that is still catching its breath from the last one. This week just turned genuinely serious, and if you want the honest version of what is actually coming instead of the comforting version, stay right here and hit that subscribe button, because over the next several minutes I am going to walk you through every piece of this puzzle. The storms today, the tropical threat, and the heat that is about to become the real headline, all of it laid out straight, the good and the bad, exactly the way you deserve to hear it. Let me start with what is happening on the ground right now, because before we talk about next week, we have to deal with today. Over the last day, rounds of storms rolled through parts of the country and left a mess behind them. Wind damage and strong gusts tore across sections of the upper Midwest, and more storms lit up across the southeast. And the aftermath is still with us this morning, because right now there are well over 180,000 homes and businesses sitting in the dark across the country. The hardest hit areas are still struggling to recover, with tens of thousands without power across the Midwest, and even parts of Hawaii still dealing with outages from the tropical system that already slammed into them. That is the backdrop we are walking into today, a country already bruised from the last round, bracing for the next. So let me show you where the danger sets up as this day unfolds. The main threat, once again, is wind. Damaging straight-line winds are the headline, the kind of gusts that snap branches, topple weakened trees, and knock the power right back out in places that just got it restored. But there's also a narrow tornado threat today, and I want to be precise about this, rather than scaring everyone in the country, because that is not how we do things here. The one area where a tornado is genuinely believable is the corridor running from Missouri down toward Tennessee and Kentucky. Everywhere else on the map, I'm not convinced the ingredients come together for a real tornado risk today. So if you are in that Missouri, Tennessee, Kentucky zone, that is where you keep your guard up the most. Here is how the day actually plays out hour by hour. Early on, you get storms firing across the eastern plains over parts of Nebraska and South Dakota, rolling through the morning and into the midday hours. As the afternoon heats up, a second area of storms bubbles up out west across the Four Corners, catching parts of Arizona, Colorado, and northern New Mexico. But the system to really watch is the one sliding across southern Iowa into Missouri and pushing toward Illinois and Indiana. That is the one carrying the tornado potential later this evening, specifically for southeastern Missouri, southern Illinois, and western Kentucky. As night falls, those storms are expected to gather themselves into a cluster, and once they do, the threat shifts more toward heavy rainfall and damaging winds rather than tornadoes. But earlier in that window, there's a real chance for a few strong supercells, the rotating storms that can briefly spin up something dangerous. Now, here's the part that makes today's setup interesting from a forecasting standpoint, and it is worth understanding because it tells you where the real risk lives. Up across northern Missouri, the winds high up in the atmosphere are weak, and when the winds aloft are weak, storms tend to be more of a wind and rain threat rather than a tornado threat, because you need that change in wind speed and direction with height to get storms rotating. But watch what happens as you slide south over southern Missouri, southern Illinois, and into the western Tennessee and Kentucky Valley. Those upper-level winds crank up dramatically. That is exactly why the tornado threat concentrates there and not farther, north. Those stronger winds aloft give the storms the twist they need, and combined with all the instability, the fuel in the atmosphere that thunderstorms feed on, those cells can hold together and stay dangerous well into the overnight and early morning hours. That overnight timing is its own concern because storms that hit while people are asleep are the ones that catch folks off guard. Then we roll into tomorrow, and the action shifts east. Overnight storms carry across the Ohio Valley. By the afternoon, everything reorganizes toward the northeast. And this is where I think the threat could actually get bumped up, because a line of storms looks capable of producing straight-line wind damage with gusts potentially reaching 50 to 60 miles an hour. And it could stretch a long way, from Long Island all the way down across the Delmarva Peninsula, pulling in Delaware, New Jersey, and eastern Pennsylvania, down through Virginia and across the mid-Atlantic. Storms fire up there too. Tomorrow does not look like a tornado day. It looks like a wind day, plain and simple, but a wind day that a lot of densely populated areas in the Northeast need to take seriously. So if you live anywhere from Virginia up through the New York City area, keep an eye on the sky tomorrow afternoon and evening. Before I move on, I want to ask you something, and I genuinely read these, so drop it in the comments. Have the storms already reached your area this week? Tell me your town and what you saw, whether it was wind damage, a power outage, hail, or just a wall of rain. And just as importantly, tell me one thing you always keep ready for when the power goes out. Because your tips genuinely help other people in this community who might be facing their first big outage. Some of the best advice on this channel comes straight from you all in that comment section. So let's build that list together. Now, let's turn to the tropics, because there are two very different stories playing out in two different oceans, and you need to understand both. Let's start with the Pacific, because that is where the immediate danger is. There is a system spinning up out there, and the forecast models are giving it a very high chance of developing into a tropical depression, and then strengthening over the coming days as it tracks westward to west-northwestward at around 10 to 15 miles an hour. And here's the concerning part, the part that keeps me watching this closely. The intensity guidance suggests this system has the potential to strengthen quickly, potentially climbing from a tropical storm up toward hurricane strength in a short window of time. The setup in the atmosphere shows a strong dome of high pressure that is going to steer this thing on a westward push. And depending on exactly how the track evolves, it could pass uncomfortably close to Hawaii within roughly 5 days. I want to be careful and honest here because Hawaii has already been through it recently. The islands were just hit by a tropical system, so people there are already exhausted, already cleaning up, and the last thing anyone wants is to hear another one might be lining up. The good news, if there is any, is that the average of the model guidance keeps the center of this new system somewhat away from a direct island strike. But, and this is critical, impacts reach far beyond the center of any tropical system. Even a track that stays offshore can hammer the islands with heavy rain and strong winds. Some guidance points toward gusts in the 40 to 50 mile an hour range, mainly focused on the Big Island, with the possibility of stronger winds spreading to other islands if the system tracks a bit closer or comes in stronger than the calmer scenario suggests. And the rain is what worries me most. On an island chain, heavy tropical rainfall is genuinely dangerous because the steep terrain funnels water into fast, violent flooding and mudslides. Some of the guidance points toward the possibility of another 7 to 8 inches of rain for the Big Island, with heavy rain for the other islands as well, and the wetter model solutions bring even more tropical moisture and heavier impacts than that. So to everyone in Hawaii watching this, I am not telling you to panic, but I am telling you to pay very close attention over the next few days, and to listen to your local officials, because it genuinely looks like another system could be heading your way. And you know better than anyone how fast conditions can turn on the islands. I also want to point out something about timing here, because it matters for anyone in Hawaii trying to plan the next few days. 5 days sounds like a long runway, but tropical systems can wobble, they can speed up or slow down, and the exact strength this thing carries by the time it gets close will shape everything from how much rain falls to how strong those wind gusts actually get. That is why I keep saying pay attention rather than panic. The center of the guidance is not aiming for a direct hit, but a system does not need to make a direct hit to cause real problems on an island chain that is already saturated from the last storm. Ground that is already soaked absorbs less water, which means the same amount of rain can produce worse flooding than it would on dry terrain. So even a glancing pass matters here in a way it might not somewhere else. Now let's cross over to the Atlantic, because this is where the story flips completely, and it is actually reassuring. As things stand, the National Hurricane Center is not flagging anything in the Atlantic over the next 7 days. Nothing. And this has been the theme of the entire hurricane season. So let me explain why, because understanding the why is far more valuable than just hearing the headline. Normally, as we push into September, the peak of the season, we start seeing big high-pressure systems set up near Bermuda that steer tropical systems around, and sometimes toward land. So that is always the region we watch, but this year the atmosphere has been actively hostile to Atlantic development. The reason comes down to one enormous force out in the Pacific. We are in the grip of a strengthening El Nino, and not just any El Nino. Forecasters now put the odds at greater than 90% that this becomes a very strong event heading into the fall. And a powerful El Nino is essentially poison for Atlantic hurricanes. It cranks up the wind shear across the tropical Atlantic. And wind shear is when winds blow at different speeds and directions at different heights. For a young tropical system trying to organize, that shear is brutal. It tilts the storm over, rips apart the tall thunderstorms it needs to survive, and shreds it before it can ever get going. Layer on top of that a persistent blanket of dry, dusty Saharan air drifting across the Atlantic, and you have a 1-2 punch that has kept a lid on this basin all season long. Tropical systems need warm, moist air to breathe, and that dry desert air chokes them out. So, when you look at the model guidance for the Atlantic, you have to read it carefully, because this is exactly where people get scared for no reason. Every single day, some model run will show a storm popping up somewhere out there, often near the Leeward Islands or the Lesser Antilles. But you have to look at whether that solution is actually trending and whether the ensemble members agree. Right now, when you dig into the ensembles, only a small fraction show any real chance of even a weak tropical depression, and the rest show the dry air simply overwhelming anything that tries to form. Any tropical wave that does roll off is more likely to just bring a surge of moisture rather than a genuine organized threat. And even in the scenarios where something does manage to hang together, the pattern is set up to sweep it around the high pressure and curve it out to sea harmlessly. What forecasters casually call a fish storm, because it only threatens the open ocean and the fish. This is backed up by the deeper atmospheric signals too, the guidance that looks at the broader environment across the main development region. The stretch of the tropical Atlantic where the big storms are born points toward mostly unfavorable conditions, not just through the rest of August, but continuing through September and even into October. And that is completely normal for a strong El Nino year. There may be some back and forth, some brief windows where things look a little less hostile as we get into early September, but the overall theme holds. The energy, the lift, the storm activity, all stays concentrated in the Pacific, which is exactly why Hawaii keeps getting targeted while the Atlantic stays quiet. The main thing to watch in the Atlantic is not the deep tropics, but the possibility of a front-driven system closer to home, something that could develop near the Gulf or along the East Coast later on. That has been the pattern all season, and I expect it to continue. Now, with the storms in the tropics covered, let's get to what I think is genuinely the biggest story of this whole forecast, the part that is going to affect the most people, and the part where the newest data took a turn for the worse, the weather pattern itself. And I have to be straight with you here, because I know a lot of you have been holding on to the promise of relief. Yes, we still have a cool front coming through this week, and for folks in the north, it is genuinely pleasant. But here's the catch that keeps tripping people up. That cooler air is reinforced by heat every single day. So the relief is more of a flicker than a flood. The next week brings a stronger cool front, and that one you will actually feel a real noticeable drop. But right as we cross the very end of August into September, the cool air pulls out, and we go through another sharp pattern change. And this one swings the door wide open for heat to come flooding back. Let me explain the machinery behind this, because it is actually straightforward once you see it. Forecasters watch a few key signals to know what the atmosphere is about to do. One of them measures the setup over the eastern Pacific near Alaska. When it tips negative, it builds a ridge of high pressure in the west and digs a cooler trough across the central and eastern United States, and that is what delivers the cool front. The newest data does show that dip coming for next week, which is the relief you have been promised. But then watch how fast the models yank that signal right back toward neutral and even positive shortly afterward, and that flip is the heat coming back. The same story shows up in the signal over the North Atlantic near Greenland, the one that can bring cold air plunging south. Just yesterday, the data was pointing toward a rare, strong, cold front. But now the models bring that blocking pattern in and then whisk it away just as quickly. So the cold shot is real, but it is brief. I know this is not what you want to hear, and I want to be clear about who I am and what this channel is. I am not here to tell you only the things that feel good. I am here to give it to you straight, the good and the bad, and let you decide what to do with it, because a comfortable lie about the weather can leave you unprepared, and being unprepared in dangerous heat is how people get hurt. So take this for exactly what it is, stay updated, and remember that the atmosphere always keeps moving, which means there's always a reason to keep checking back. Here is where the data gets specifically concerning. There is a well-known tendency for one of the major American models to be too aggressive, to drag those cool anomalies too far south and too deep. And on the newest runs, that same model is not only failing to push the cool air deep this time, it is actually building the heat stronger than expected. Picture the map by the end of next week. That aggressive model shows a big heat pocket ballooning from the south all the way up into Canada and stretching back across the southwest, with the cool relief confined to only the northern tier. Now, the more consistently accurate European guidance does not buy that extreme northward surge of heat. It keeps things more measured. A nice cool front for the north, but not the scorcher everywhere solution. So the truth is probably somewhere in between. But the fact that the heat is showing up stronger than forecast on multiple looks is the warning sign that the second half of this story is about heat, not relief. And this is confirmed when you look at the official outlooks from the Climate Prediction Center. Their guidance for the coming week to 10 days does show that cooler jet stream dipping through, but it does not carry that cool air far to the south at all. Instead, there's a big above-average heat signal locking in across a huge swath of the country, stretching from Montana down through Texas and Louisiana. And the extreme heat outlook is even more pointed. There's a high risk of dangerous heat building for the window around the 26th through the 28th, centered on New Mexico, Texas, and pushing into Kansas, Oklahoma, and western Arkansas, possibly lingering into Louisiana. A broader moderate risk zone stretches all the way from Louisiana across to Arizona. But here's the thing you cannot lose sight of. You do not have to wait until next week for dangerous heat, because what you are dealing with this very week is shaping up to be some of the hottest weather of the entire year. The National Weather Service is warning that many areas could see their hottest temperatures so far in 2026, or even the hottest in several years. And the detail that makes this genuinely dangerous is the lack of overnight relief. In many urban areas, the temperature may not even fall below 80 degrees at night. That matters more than most people realize, because the human body needs those cooler overnight hours to recover from the heat of the day. When the nights stay hot, the danger compounds day after day, and that is precisely when heat becomes deadly. And I want to spend just a moment on why the overnight numbers matter so much, because this is the piece that gets glossed over in a lot of forecasts. When the sun goes down and temperatures should be easing off, the human body is supposed to get a chance to reset. Your core temperature is supposed to drop, your heart rate is supposed to settle, and that window is what allows people to recover from a scorching afternoon before the next one hits. Take that window away, and every single day starts to stack on top of the last one instead of starting fresh. That is the difference between a hot week that is uncomfortable and a hot week that becomes genuinely dangerous. And that is exactly the scenario setting up here, night after night, in the 80-degree range, with no real chance for the body, or the ground, or the buildings to cool back down before the heat builds right back up again the next afternoon. Let's talk about what that actually means in human terms, because these are not just numbers on a map. At the major impact level, the heat threatens anyone without effective cooling or adequate hydration. That is a huge number of people, the elderly, outdoor workers, anyone without reliable air conditioning. And at the extreme level, the level shown in the deepest purple on the heat maps, you are looking at rare, long-duration heat with little to no overnight relief at all, the most dangerous category there is. And this extreme heat is not confined to one small corner. It stretches across the southeast through Mississippi, Texas, and Oklahoma, and all the way to the southwest. Today and tomorrow, it builds. Then Friday and Saturday, it pivots. And then Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday, it settles in and hangs on across the south. Let me give you the concrete numbers so you can plan. For today, temperatures climb well into the hundreds across the southwest and the south central states, while the 80s push farther north. But the number that really matters is the heat index, the feels-like temperature once you factor in the humidity. Across the southeast, that feels-like value shoots into the strong 90s and well past 100 degrees. Overnight, the northern areas get a genuinely nice break, dropping into the 60s and even the 50s in spots. But across the south, that is where you stay, stuck in the high 70s and 80s overnight, with no real relief. And then tomorrow, the heat comes right back, even driving 100-degree temperatures as far north as Idaho and possibly toward Washington, with the heat index climbing right alongside it. This brings me to a second thing I want you to weigh in on down in the comments, and this one could genuinely help someone. For those of you who live in the south, in these zones where the nights just do not cool off, what is the one thing that actually helps you get through a stretch like this? Maybe it is a specific way you keep your home cool, a routine for staying hydrated, a plan for checking on an elderly neighbor, or a place you go to escape the worst of it. Share your best tip, because there are people watching this who are about to face the most dangerous heat of their lives, and the practical wisdom in this community is worth more than any forecast I can give. So let me pull all of this together into one clear picture, because I promised you the honest version, and here it is in full. This week, storms continue to rumble across the middle and eastern parts of the country, mainly a wind threat with a narrow tornado risk in the Missouri to Kentucky corridor today, shifting toward the northeast tomorrow. Out in the Pacific, a new system is spinning up and strengthening, with the potential to bring another round of heavy rain and gusty winds to a Hawaii that is already worn down from the last one. In the Atlantic, the strengthening Super El Nino, along with brutal wind shear and dry Saharan air, keeps the basin remarkably quiet, with no real threats on the horizon and any would-be storms likely to curve harmlessly out to sea. And the headline, the thing that will touch the most lives, is the heat. A cool front brings brief, welcome relief this week, and a stronger one next week, but it does not reach deep into the south. And right behind it, the heat surges back with real intensity as we cross into September, bringing some of the most dangerous temperatures of the year, with dangerously warm nights across the southern half of the country. The reason I can tell you the cool front is coming is that the signals genuinely support it. And the reason I'm warning you that it will not last, and that the heat is the real story, is that the newest data is pointing that direction with increasing confidence. That is the difference between a forecast that just tells you what you want to hear and one that tells you what you actually need to know to stay safe. The heat that is coming is not an inconvenience. It is a genuine hazard. And the people who take it seriously are the ones who come through it just fine. So here is what I need you to do. If this cleared things up and gave you the straight version instead of the sugar-coated one, hit that like button, because it genuinely helps this channel reach more people who need the honest forecast. Please, seriously, drink your water even when you do not feel thirsty, because in heat like this, thirst shows up too late. Check on your neighbors, especially the older folks and anyone living alone, because a 2-minute knock on a door can save a life in weather like this. And do not forget your pets, because the pavement gets hot enough to burn their paws, and they feel this heat just as much as we do. If you're not already part of the family here, subscribe and turn those notifications on, because this pattern is shifting fast. The tropics are active, and I will be here breaking down every single change the moment it happens. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from and how this heat is treating you. And I will see you in the very next update. Stay cool, stay safe, look out for each other, and remember, the atmosphere just made its move, and now you know exactly what is coming next.